folks, welcome back to the HS Tech Channel. In this video we're going to look at the infamous server versions of OS2, some of which are almost completely forgotten about. We're going to look at OS2 2.11 Symmetric Multiprocessor Edition, which is what you see now, and we're also going to look at an OS2 Warp 4 server, as well as a Warp 4.5 server for eBusiness. So here's our Warp 4 server, and here's our 4.5 server for eBusiness. So we're going to start with this original OS2 SMP. Now this is of historical note because this was in a way a bit of a technological miracle. Well, not really, but making basically 32-bit DOS, OS2, into a multiprocessor system is no small feat. So I'm really impressed that this was able to be made. All thanks to basically one man at IBM. So great work back in the day. Now, unfortunately, this machine is really unstable and will crash a ridiculous amount. Basically, as soon as I try to do a ping, it's going to kill it. But we're going to try as best we can here. Now, the way that I actually did this is actually legitimate. This is actual OS2 2.11 SMP, and believe it or not, it is actually running in SMP mode. But as you can tell from the, I guess you could say the instability, oh great, this has already crashed. As you can tell from the instability of the system, this definitely leaves much to be desired. So, and yeah, this is a virtual machine, so we'll go ahead and reboot it, and we're just going to keep trying, and you basically just brute force it till it works. It'll stall here, and then when the logo goes from one of those to the big logo, then it worked. But you basically just have to brute force it until it works. Now the way I did this was by, yeah, there you go, processors initialized 4. The way I did this was basically by taking the OS2 2.11 media, which I do have CDs of the SMP version, which I believe this is actually one of the only copies in the world that actually works, and then I took the platform support driver from Warp 4.5 server for eBusiness, which supports a modern day, I guess you could kind of call it modern day multiprocessor spec system, and that's how I got to work. Well, let's see what we can do on here. Now I've configured this to have TCP/IP and LAN server. So LAN server is basically Windows LAN Manager but running on OS2, and believe it or not, Windows can talk to this without a hitch. And this is actually, for 1993, a lot faster than a Windows for Workgroups LAN Manager or a DOS LAN Manager. This is almost 20 times better. So we do have TCP/IP, and it is actually configured. Here it is, albeit not really useful. It's at least there. Well, yeah, we'll discard our options there because we don't really care. We do have this LAN server. Now this is actually configured to talk on a domain. Now OS2 domains are different from Windows NT domains. With Windows NT domains there's a little bit more association. OS2 is kind of dumb, but it's still better than nothing, although the icons are kind of weird. Let's do that there. Now we can attempt a logon, but it's not really going to work. We'll try. There we go. Okay, I guess it did actually go through and work. But we can't really do much about this. We can invoke the administrator if it thinks we're logged on. Of course, because the network stack is hosed, we can't really do much here, but let's see if it will work. It does not seem to want to actually open. And it's already crashed again. So we'll go ahead and fire this through the reboot ringer again here. And it will take a couple tries, but we will eventually get it. Now, this is honestly not really a notorious issue for OS2. This is something that happens with almost every OS2 system you try to run nowadays. Version 1 point something won't even run. Like if you want to run 1.1 or 1.0 to 1.3, you basically have to hex set it to patch out a divide by zero that occurs if the processor's running too fast. So having a broken SMP is not at all unsurprising to me. So we're just going to minimize as much as we can. By the way, that's the minimize function right there. I don't know if folks are familiar with how to use the old style CUA. If there's like a hash pattern on it, that means a window is like that open somewhere. Blue means it's a shadow. Also, I do have a prayer defined, but it's not like it can really do anything. Let's see if we can actually do, okay, we'll try logging in. We'll log into this local machine and see if we can browse our own resources. If not, we'll just have to invoke the command shell and do things that way. Might as well go ahead and get it opened up. Okay, that was probably a bad idea. I probably shouldn't have very net view. Net share. It's probably going to throw an error because we're not technically logged on. Okay, so requester hasn't even started. So the way that the dependencies work here is the server process requires the requester process, and then netlogon also requires the server process. So it's pretty jacked up, but it does kind of work. There's also the user account management system, although we can't do this because we're not logged on, and we can't log on. I mean, we can try to log on, but because requester isn't running, there you go. Now, okay, this is clearly a single user system, because when I booted up, you know, it just threw me right onto the desktop. Not really much was checked in terms of logon, and this is the DOS and Windows 3.1 style logon, or maybe on even Windows 9X. If you have a Windows 9X system, you know, 95, 98, and ME, if you get a password, like you boot it up, you get a password prompt, you don't know what the password is, just hit cancel or escape. That's a network logon password. Okay, MPTS. I want to make a comment about MPTS really quickly here. Now, MPTS is basically what you use on OS2 to configure your Ethernet cards. Yes, I know it says LAPS, but they renamed it to MPTS in later versions. Alright, so let's keep messing around with it here. So, a few things to note. Well, okay, I'll briefly mention this. So, if you have like DOS workstations or Windows for workgroups or something, you're going to want to use the standard NetBIOS protocol. This right here is raw NetBIOS frames. This is not NetBIOS over IPX, and this is not NetBIOS over TCP/IP, because that's right here. So if we edit this, you can optionally change some of the parameters. Be careful, if you set some of these too high, you'll just crash the LAN server every time it starts. So be careful doing that. And then of course, TCP/IP. Now if you have SNA, and don't worry, we're going to look at that in a minute, because we're going to cover as much OS2 networking as we can. SNA will also go in here with the 802.3 driver, which is right here. And this will give, or I'm sorry, 802.2. This will give you SNA access. Okay, we don't actually need to do anything there, but that's basically it for that. Now, of course, this does actually have this SMP system may very well be the only actual SMP Windows 3.x. I know it sounds ridiculous, but this is basically as close as you're going to get to multiprocessor Windows 3.1. And again, watch out for the instability, because it is going to be brutal. Yeah, so this won't actually stop, or this won't actually start, it'll just stop itself. Now, oops, we do have TCP/IP, but if I try to ping anything, you might be interested to see what usually happens. Yeah, so, alright, let's look at another system, one that will actually work. I'm actually going to pause the system so it's not eating up the processor, because it's just going to sit there and idle really high. Let's look at Warp Advanced Server 4. Or Warp Server 4, I'm sorry. There's also Warp Advanced Server 4 and Warp Advanced Server 4 SMP. Neither of which we're going to look at here, because those are a little bit finicky to run. So, if we do vir, it's going to report this as being OS2 Warp 3. Now, contrast this to Warp Advanced Server SMP, which will tell you that it's Operating System 2 version 4.0, if I'm not mistaken. So, this is basically the same thing as before, except actually likely to work. So, we can actually take a real look through this here. So, of course, this being Warp 3, you get your standard stuff here. For some reason, UPM is in here. I don't actually have any real accounts defined. Also, for some reason, the logon and logoff system on this thing is borked. I don't know how in the world that happened, but everything's set correctly, but I think it's having a problem talking to the domain controller, which we're also going to take a look at. Sign-on coordination. Okay, this is a disaster. This is basically proto Active Directory, by the way. I know it seems ridiculous, but NSC2 is, in a way, basically a single sign-on system that sort of predated Active Directory that would, in a way, almost kind of inspire it. But NSC2 is extremely difficult to get to work. But if you have multiple systems defined, if the domain browser actually worked, you'd see them in here, and you could sign on to multiple different systems using multiple different usernames and passwords all at once, in the same way as you can sort of do AD federation. But we're not here to complain about Active Directory, we're here to complain about OS2. Okay, LAN distance remote access. This is a dial-up system, or a dial-in server. All this is slow as mud, by the way. Eventually we'll get the dialog to open. If it ever does open. Hopefully it's not stuck here forever. Okay, at this point I think it's going to be stuck here forever, so we'll just have to work around that. This right here does not allow you to do anything. This right here is the... Okay, I don't know why there's two LAPS entries, but I'll show you what it looks like on here. So I have SNA, really, NetBIOS over TCP. Oh my goodness. Okay, there we go. That took forever. Yeah, null modem did not start. Yeah, it's trying to establish a slip connection, but it's not going to work. So, actually, you know, we'll keep this open for now, just for fun. That's configured, by the way, right here, but it's only going to speak NetBIOS. You can get it to run TCP/IP, but it's very cumbersome to do. Now, if you've somehow borked the configuration, you basically have to manually edit config.sys, because all this does is plug a bunch of lines into config.sys, and that's basically how they hammered it out. But that'll wrap it up for looking at laps again for the 20th time. Yeah, okay, I don't know why they say this. It actually works, but apparently not. Okay, 386 HPFS. What if I told you that a staggering amount of OS2 systems that run on 386 don't actually use a 386 protected mode version of the file system driver? Really? Yeah, well, there you go. That's kind of proof of that. Okay, we're going to log off, but guess what? The log off dialog just logs other people off. It doesn't actually log you off. I don't know what in the world that, I don't know how that made any sense. Okay, error log utility. Okay, so for what it's worth, this is kind of where the event log system comes from on Windows NT, is people figured, oh yeah, we'll just knock it off from OS2. Okay, primary domain controller for domain %1. This is how you know you have quality software. Also, look how small this is. This right here is like negligible size, and you just translate it into English later along. So, okay, this is kind of screwy. I'm going to show you how to kind of fix this. There's a few workarounds that you can do to authenticate for a domain. I'm going to show you how domain entries are defined in a second on OS2 domains. But basically the gist of it is you basically have user accounts, special user accounts that are defined to OS2 on the domain controller, and we'll look at that in a hot second. Okay, network messaging. This won't actually work unless you're logged on, and I'm not actually logged on. I think I just crashed it. Nope, there we go. If we click broadcast, actually we'll broadcast the whole network. This will actually, if you have like the DDE win pop-up stuff running, it will actually show up on other operating systems as well. If you have like Windows for work groups or something. Oh my goodness, stop asking me a million questions. Okay. Now, LAN server administration. This is where it gets good. Hopefully it won't prompt me to log in because it's impossible to log in. We're going to try. Okay. This technically won't work because there's an association problem, it seems. It's probably going to throw an error, but this right here is the actual real administrative dialog for the LAN server. Again, I think it's kind of impressive that the LAN server administration dialog system, which you're going to see on Warp 4.5 server for e-business here in a second, not on here, but on here. We'll look at it in a moment. And that, this other machine, by the way, has a lot of stuff on it, and we're going to look at all that stuff too, just for fun. Yeah, so it's clearly not going to work. Yeah, there's your DDE stuff. I don't know who actually uses this. This doesn't usually really work properly, but sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, okay, we know they're made. Yeah, okay, we'll figure it out. So it'll just boot you out of that. Here is the config dialog. You may actually, if you've dealt with Warp 4.5 server for e-business, you may know this dialog has actually been removed. You actually legit need to reinstall if you want to do this, but this is where you go through to, I guess you could say, deploy it. Okay. PSNS, or as an acronym, I think it's Personal Safe and Sound. I think is what it stands for. By the way, this right here will talk to AdStar, also called DSM, also called TSM. So if you have a VMCMS or an MVS mainframe, or actually there's versions that run on other systems as well, PSNS will, believe it or not, actually allow you to dump stuff to a Tivoli Storage Manager or Distributed Storage Manager system. Okay, this is ridiculous. I want this thing. Okay, yeah. How compression? Yeah, make sure you do compress this. I think it's like LZMA compression. Okay, where location do you? Oh, good grief! I don't remember how you actually define. You have to do something advanced. Yeah. Okay, there we go. New method. Destination. Oh, okay, this is impossible to use. This is the worst user interface I think I've ever seen in my life. Like, what is this? I don't know. Anyways, PSNS sucks. Just literally use anything else. But it is a relatively trivial way to get data into a TSM or DSM or AdStar server. I'll probably demonstrate that one day because I do have a few AdStar clients that work a couple places. Okay, print services facility 2. This is some more black magic from the bad old days. This is, if you know what Ghost Script is, Ghost Script will allow you to print PostScript on non-PostScript printers. Guess what this is? Basically that. Good luck actually using this. Okay, whatever. Good enough. Let's see. Also, you can define AFP printers. AFP is an advanced function printer, so like the fancy printers on mainframes. Of course, everything comes back to mainframes. Here's the print submitter. This right here is how you get a job into the system. It is not done through the standard way. Actually, let me open up the control panel. I don't know why the control panel icon is so nondescript. We can actually somewhere in here, there you go. You can change the font that'll spit out on the printer, and then if you define a non-PostScript printer, you can use the PostScript driver. And it does actually, I believe, have, I think, LPD emulation. You're definitely gonna want to use this here. And there's your definitions for the AFP stuff. If you've ever dealt with an AFP printer like 3800 or any of those modern derivatives of it, there you go. Okay, of course we have TCP/IP. Let's see what we have here. How about 3270 Telnet? For whatever reason, it doesn't actually open, or it takes years to open. And oh my gosh, even this most ugly user interface ever. Like, what in the world were they thinking? Like, that is so ugly. Like, that color scheme is awful. But we do also have regular Telnet. So there you go, standard stuff there. We have a very early web browser that is totally useless. I don't think I have any functional HTTP daemons around here. I know for a fact that one's probably not up. Good grief, stop with the trillion dialogues. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is running on MVS. Well, actually OS 390. And this is actually relatively new, too. So there we go. That's not going to work. I don't have DNS. I don't even know what that is. I don't remember what I set that to. Anyways, that's the Web Explorer. Now, let's get networking. So what we're going to do here is first we're actually going to switch over to our Warp Server 4 system, or our Warp Server for e-business system. Okay, so this is actually a domain controller. Now, I'm going to apologize in advance. This right here is a VNC session. This is running on a QEMU system. This is a uniprocessor system, as you can see down here, and if we run the SMP monitor, it's going to be kind of jacked up. Note that the mouse movement speed is different from the VNC mouse movement speed, and there is like a mouse acceleration, so you can sort of like sling it around like a slingshot. And it's really annoying and really stupid, but the easiest way is you just kind of got to get it into a corner and then sort of pull it out, but then it doesn't work. Because for whatever reason, the vertical acceleration is different from the horizontal acceleration. Couldn't tell you what's going on there. Okay, so let's get going here. A lot of this is basically the same. On here I have WebSphere, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is good old-fashioned IBM WebSphere for OS2. I have a Lotus Domino server, which only runs in full screen for some ridiculous reason. I have a exact same web browser that is antique and useless. I have HTTP server, which is actually a port of Apache 1.4. I'm pretty sure it's Apache 1.4. FFST2, which is probably the most ridiculous seam style system ever made. Oh great, my mouse cursor's going off the screen here. I have DB2 6.1. This does actually work. Let's see. Connect to... I think that works. Okay, it's not actually running. Unfortunately, but it will get the job done. So, let's see what else we got here. If I can click on anything. Okay. Kicks for OS2. Yeah, this is a real thing. If you know kicks for mainframe or MVS, well, guess what? Here's an OS2 version. Yes, they use actually Btrieve to do the... Okay, I guess I need to reinstall this. I guess I've somehow damaged it. But they use Btrieve to do the vSAN emulation. Now, we also have TCP/IP, as we've had forever, except this time we have a lot more stuff. And if we fire up TCP/IP configuration, you may actually be pleasantly surprised, 30 minutes from now when it opens, that this thing actually has stuff like an NFS server. No joke, if I go over to my minimized Windows list, you're going to see all the junk they have running. Line printer daemon, NFS, port mapper, also called RPC bind if you're from the older Unix world, talkd, line printer daemon again, LPR port D, by the way, and this will actually bind LPD to actual printers. So there's a printer that's attached to the system. I think it's just a network printer, so it's kind of like a proxy. Remote shell, remote exec, FTP, telnet, a bunch of command prompts that are probably running stuff. There's that HTTP server, which is, it's actually 1.3. And it's actually really easy to configure because it is just standard old Apache. Anyway, for whatever reason, the TCP/IP config dialog doesn't open. Probably got that broken somehow. Communications server, this is actually SNA, believe it or not. If I go to administration, subsystem management, and then logical links, you'll see that this is talking to a couple mainframes here. And for some unknown reason, this mouse cursor sucks. It does not want to talk to my VM system. I guarantee I know what the issue is. I just got to restart the link. You have to deal with that a lot on OS2. For what it's worth, if you're like trying to get into mainframe networking and you're going to do or deal with SNA, as you saw in a SNA video I made, Communication Server 2 is kind of horrible. Okay, we have Netscape. Alright, well, we're here for LAN Server Administration, which is actually over here. So we'll go ahead and invoke the LAN Server Administration dialog. Now this is the newer version, so we'll actually properly log in. And if you're familiar with how OS2 and LAN Manager style systems work, or I guess if you know how login works, it just blasts out your packets. So there we go. Here's our local machine here. We're doing all of this. Netrun isn't actually running. Watch out for that because that can be a bit of a problem. Browser, I don't know why I'm not running the browser service. You should be running it. If you know like the Windows NT LAN Manager browser service, they still have it today actually. This will cause this machine to show up if you just browse the network on a Windows machine. Even on a Windows 10 machine, I think it will still be discoverable somehow, some way. Anyway, 40 minutes from now, that will actually open up. Now, you can actually just make as many domains as you want. Here's something I kind of find interesting. The OS2 LAN server can actually serve out multiple domains. So here's our one domain, and let's see what we got in here. It's basically just everything you'd expect. So, this cursor is going to kill me. User accounts. These are our user accounts. I have the guest account. These two are actually computer accounts, which we're going to see in another menu here in a second. And then, of course, we have a test user, another test user. That's just an easy finger roll on a keyboard. And then, of course, the administration user. Groups, you can guess what those are. Directory resource definitions. I don't know why in the world they call it this. These are shared folders. You just drag this off and make a new one. And here's our generic shared folder. Of course, would be complete without one of those. Here's a share on a drive format with JFS. And we'll look at all that in a second when we do our command line stuff. Here's our DB2 database storage, DB2 Nice. And then our OS2 kicks install directory. So if for some reason I want to yank clients out and run them on DOS or Windows for workgroups or whatever. Okay, it's shared printers. Okay, this is horrible. Okay, shared printers, there you go. I don't actually have any printers shared, nor do I have any shared modems, but you can do that if you want. You can also share terminals, like a null modem cable to a mainframe or VAX or whatever, and you can get into that. Okay, define servers. This is where it gets kind of weird. This right here is, of course, going to be self-referent. Okay, I guess that service never started. I probably need to configure it in that case. We'll just not. And then this right here, we're actually going to remove this. Oh, great. This always happens. What? Oh, good grief. Object. How in the world do you remove one of these? Oh, great. You click on select and it takes 45 minutes because it has to send out a bunch of networking options. Yeah, there we go. Workforce serve. We'll get rid of it just so I can show you how to define the system to a domain. Drag and right click out. Of course, that other system's name is workforce serve. That will do. You can just sit here and draw whatever icon you want. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you can literally just do it and it will work. And then of course this is just a standard object properties. Remember, this is OS2, so this is an object-oriented operating system. Translation, it sucks, but I guess it is what it is. You know, everything has to be like the AS400. Now when we try to click on this, it's going to yell, and you'll see why in a second. But it is going to technically have a problem. It'll say network access is denied because we're not actually signed into it, and it don't want to actually sign into us either. So this is where we break out the good old-fashioned command line. Now you may already know what I'm about to type. I'm about to type net. If you go on your Windows 10 machine and you type net, you're going to be able to run a net command. However, you may notice that there's a lot of extra stuff here. Like some of these are for totally different stuff. And likewise, you can get all sorts of stuff. Now, I don't know why in the world they said net DASD, you know, like the mainframe term, like a DASD is a disk drive. Well, here we are, but this will, it's basically disk quotas. I don't know why they use that term, but we can do net view and it will show you everybody in the domain. And as you can see, that workforce server, even though it's up and running, is not apparently quote-unquote on the domain. So we can do net view ourselves, and this is all the shared folders. Likewise, we can type net share, and you'll be able to see all those shared folders that are, like all of them that are defined, including the special administrator shares. And there's our IPC share. And you can actually, if you know what a null session attack is, this is vulnerable to a null session. So I wouldn't really call it an attack, but it's I guess an issue that could occur. So we can also do net user. We'll do ourself first. And you can see how this is done. And you can see that this is defined as, down here, it's in the servers group, as opposed to the admins group. And there you go. So there's all the servers that are defined, even though for some reason they're not up and running, but that is okay. Now we can also do net view. Let's do something just for fun. Let's try viewing a Windows NT domain. Now I'm 100% sure this won't work, but I think I have a, yeah, okay, it's not going to work because it can't find it. This browses domains differently. The OS2 LAN Manager net view can't actually talk or query a like a domain name, so you kind of have to work around that. And that's of course going to be access denied. And let's also try that just for fun. And it's going to say an unexpected network error has occurred. In reality, that's pipe access denied. So actually, we'll keep this open for now. Now let's go back over to this workforce server system here, and let's mess around with this over here. So I can do the exact same stuff, except it's slightly less sophisticated because I don't have the remote IPL thing, also called net booting. Let's do a net view NT4 server. actually, yeah, we need to log on. So let's take a look at the logon command here. There are a lot of options that you can do when you do a net logon. Now you can have verified through a domain, verified locally, or verified not at all. Verifying not at all is the equivalent of DOS, LAN Manager, network sign-on, or Windows 3.1 or 9X, where it just says, okay, my password is this. If it ain't like it, oh well. So that's actually what we're going to play around with first. We're going to log on with no verification, and we're going to log on with the username administrator and a password 123, which will log us into a Windows NT domain and also a Unixware 7.1 domain with that ridiculous ported over infamous, you've probably seen it in the Unixware video, the LAN server that, or the quote-unquote advanced server that runs on Unixware. So, okay, yeah, okay, we get it. It's always going to be like that. Okay, well, we're technically logged into stuff. When we do net view, you'll hopefully be able to see stuff. And, well, okay, it still thinks we're on a ridiculous domain, even though that's not what we want. We should, hoping, be able to do this. Sometimes it just flat out doesn't work. But, no, okay, there we are. It did actually work. And we can also view, that's not a real name. Ah, great, you can't kill it. Control break doesn't work either. You just have to wait. It's an invalid name. But as you can see, when I did NetView NT4 server, since we technically quote unquote signed on, we didn't actually really verify ourselves. It's just all the servers on the network heard our logon packet, so like, oh yeah, I remember you from 5 seconds ago when you signed on. Now after a while, of course, those logins are going to stale out, and there is like a retention time for the logon. And once that retention time is up, it'll be like, send your password hash again, and then it'll do it. So, as you can see, there's all the shared folders there. There's 2 printers I have defined, which are just on serial ports, and they're actually just, this NT4 server is also running on QEMU, and they're just keyed to a file. And then, of course, netlogon, classic. Now, there is actually netlogon for OS2 domains as well. For instance, if I go over here and do netshare, there's netlogon, and it's exactly what you'd expect. But over here, 45 minutes later, assuming the NetBIOS stack actually works, now it does default to using NetBIOS. Okay, it does default to using NetBIOS over TCP/IP, so that's what it's preferring. So it's gonna have a bit of a difficulty there, but we can actually telnet into it. We can actually log into this domain. And yeah, I'm actually on a Unix system. We can do netview / warp4 serve. Maybe this will work, maybe it won't work. I actually don't know how broken the LAN server is on here. Okay, yeah, access denied. This isn't going to work because, again, you can't browse like that. Ah, yeah, it doesn't like... Okay. It didn't like backspace. Okay, well that's not really working either. But we can do netuse. We can do netuse z / nt4 server / share. And guess what? Whoop-de-doo. We actually have a browsable, in theory, network share. And if we go over to OS2 system and drives, I don't know why this is unnecessarily convoluted. There you go, it's network drive. And it'll take 45 minutes to open because the network stack is the most non-performant thing ever made. It definitely reeks of poor design. Oh, finally. If I can get this out of here. Oh, great. This is... Oh, wow. When it works, but there's a lot of tuning parameters that you have to change, and I do mean a lot. And also, OS2 does not really take too kindly talking to Windows NT, because Windows NT has to bend over backwards for it. But if you mount an OS2 share on NT, it'll actually say, hey, this volume's file system type is HPFS, or FAT32. And you're probably wondering, what in the world is all this junk? Okay, I should probably stop using the GUI, because it's just going to lock up on us again. Oh, wow. Okay, I need to close this ASAP. I should probably just reboot. Rebooting's boring. Yeah, well, at least it will work. Oh, boy. Let's reboot. Believe it or not, this actually boots fairly quickly, and it's fairly stable. and I'm actually kind of surprised. It's unfortunate that you have to reboot so much. Also, I do have the 386 HUFS driver. It's actually installed when you install the LAN server stuff. Now, I should mention, you can actually install the standalone LAN server version 4 on anything from OS2 2.11 up to basically OS2 Warp 3, whatever version you want, with or without TCP/IP. Thing is you don't need TCP/IP to run the LAN server. That's what makes it so interesting, is you don't actually need TCP/IP. I think that's kind of interesting. If you have it, you know, more power to you, but not great. This is going to take forever. We'll just minimize our startup bash file, but now let's attempt to sign on to the domain, and we're going to do it half-stepped. We're going to do, did this thing crash? No, it didn't. Logon/v none, but we're going to log on with admin and password, which will tie us into that OS2 LAN server in quote-unquote compatibility mode, where it's basically pretending to be like a DOS client, which I know is ridiculous, but it does technically work. We can't log on until the startup procedure goes through. Also, all this other stuff that's running. I do have system view. Believe it or not, I do actually have system view. I recommend not using system view, by the way. Yeah, I want to get out of here, please. Okay, so now we just have to wait on this to start. Okay, there we go. That took a hot minute there to get going. Now we can actually log on. So we'll log on with admin and password, and this will quote-unquote sign us on to that one OS2 server. However, we will be disjoint. We won't actually be on the domain. We're not having domain authentication, we're just having LAN Manager authentication. So again, it's what DOS and Windows 3.1 and Windows 98 did. Now, this will take forever. It's basically just transmitting packets until it thinks it's transmitted enough. And you can't see them because you can't see the VirtualBox network indicator because I've got it zoomed in slightly. But it is transmitting a fair amount of packets here. So, successful. It doesn't really tell you it's successful, but if we do net view, this should in theory work, although it may have privilege fighting issues because that server is going to see that this one's defined in it as a server, and it's going to be like, what are you doing? You're not actually authenticated. But if it works, you would have kind of just discovered a security problem. And we're going to see if it works. And if it does work, then that means I've basically just ratted out a LAN Manager security problem. Meaning, in a way, I have I have any workstation impersonating a server. Because the smart thing is, the LAN server is going to say, wait, hang on, I see that your system is defined as a server on my end, yet you're not authenticated. Boom, there you go. Fortunately, OS2 LAN Server 4.5 fixes this, but if you're running version 4, that can actually be a bit of an annoying issue if you have a jacked up LAN server configuration. Okay, let's switch this thing over to using NetBIOS, just so I can sort of demonstrate how to do that. So go into your LAN services dialog, open up Laps, press enter 50 times, and then change this to protocol 1, change this to protocol 0, and now we click OK, close, exit, and then you'll want to reboot. So we'll go ahead and reboot this, and while we reboot, we'll go back over and look at this LAN server here. Now, technically speaking, I could log off, and this will actually function fully, I guess you could say, perfectly independently as a workstation. If I do log off, and it's going to say, well, I'll say, hey, I'm logging off. Log off has occurred on your system, I'm aware. That will actually close the LAN server admin dialogues, by the way. Hang on, I just got to push Control and Delete on this other system so it will boot. There we go. I can do logon/v9, and I can log back into the username and password that works on the NT domain and the Unix domain. And we already know this works. Okay, again, with unexpected network error, you can guess why. We'll see if this works. Sometimes it will work. Yeah, okay, it'll work. And I can use netuse//unixware714/home. This is basically it. I mean, some of these files may be... Hang on, okay, apparently I have a massive issue over here with this. Okay, we got about 50 errors here. So this is going to cause let's reboot this again. This is the problem with OS2 networking, is if you have the slightest error, just the most minor mistake, your system's destroyed. Forget it, it's over. You know, it is over S2. That's what that stands for. So here we go. We're gonna load up in a bit, and we'll see what we get in a moment. Okay, so we have a problem binding these. An error occurred while opening network driver net 1 and net 2. So they're probably reversed or something. And yeah, okay, we know that. We know that the NetBIOS stack was installed. We'll remove it and we'll re-add it. And this error down here is always going to yell at us. Now what we have to do here is we have to understand that for the most part, there we go, it's relatively easy to recover from this. So fire up your lapse dialog, and then the trick is you just remove. We'll just do straight NetBIOS. Oh my goodness, this thing just froze. Maybe it'll unfreeze. I'm stuck. Oh, there we go. I'll exit. Looks good to me. Yeah, it hasn't even started, but that's okay. And then if we're lucky, this will work. Yeah, okay, so it's not going to work. So this machine is basically hosed. So you have to be really careful messing around with this and do this on virtual machines. If you're doing this on real hardware, you're going to waste 45 minutes reinstalling OS2 50 times. So you're definitely going to want to take very judicious use of VM snapshots. Now, since we can't actually start networking anymore, I am actually going to we'll shut this down and we'll restore the snapshot, and then I can load back up and restore from the snapshot. And I did this right before. I don't actually need to make any changes here. I can just cancel and exit out of this. And in theory, I'll try logging onto the domain now. I don't think it will work. It's worth a shot, but I seriously doubt it's going to work. There is actually a fundamental incompatibility here. When you install OS2 4.5 Warp Server for eBusiness, the last part, or WSeB, this is what you'll see it down as, you're going to have to tell it what kind of functionality level you want, kind of like Active Directory. That setting is not easy to find, but you need to be compatible with quote-unquote LAN Manager networks. Then you can have older OS2, and you can even have Windows NT systems get on, by the way. There is actually LDAP support too, so if you have like a Windows 2000 or anything newer than that, you can use LDAP on this OS2 system. And as jacked up as it is, it will kinda work. There you go, remote node or domain server is currently unavailable, as we know. And that's just because we're running two different protocols here. It will prefer one over the other. So whatever your protocol slot 1 is, that's the default. However, again, NetBIOS over TCP/IP is really flaky on older versions of OS2, and this version being from 1996 is one of those really flaky versions. But I think that's going to wrap it up for here. That's basically just a whirlwind tour of the OS2 server versions, and it's a shame that TCP/IP doesn't work on the 2.11 SMP system, but it's honestly not that bad. Now let's actually I'll throw it in here just for fun. Let's get that 2.11 SMP system going here. So we'll switch back over to that good old system, and let us look at what you have to do. Oh my goodness, it already crashed. Ha, there we go. That hotkey works really well after all. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to go to OS2 and look for your PSD files. And of course, this is your platform support driver. Now, you can yank one out of the OS2 Warp Server for eBusiness image. You can just go and you can find it. It is under here. Let me just log back on real quick here, because this machine needs to run 24/7. This machine actually does serve up some useful stuff for some older computers that we're going to look at in the future. Pretty sure it's under here. There it is. Okay, so here are all of your options for platform support drivers. Crap, good, crap. No one uses a WSeB system. No one has an HP ProLiant with a multiprocessor system anymore. None of these are any good. You want this one. So take that and throw it on a floppy disk. Then go back over to your amazing OS2 SMP system. After you've installed it, you're going to have, while you're installing it, you're going to have a prompt for select the platform support driver you want. When you do that, slot in your disk that has your other thing in there, and then you need to do this. Oops. Go down a few lines and double check that your PSD is defined. Now, note where this is being loaded. It varies from system to system, but the general rule of thumb is that you need to load the PSD after you've loaded the core DOS drivers. However, I have seen it work with it actually the first line, but you must at least, if you have the 386 HPFS driver, that must go first. That there's no two ways about it. You have to load that first, and then you're basically good to go. But if you throw that PSD file onto a 1.44 meg floppy drive, and you go through the installer and basically just say, hey, I want to use some other PSD driver, and so insert disk now, please. Boom, throw your disk in, and you're off to the races. But yeah, this is honestly a very surprising system. I'm kind of surprised that OS2 SMP actually works, but at least I can tell you how to do it, because there's basically like no information online on how to do this. I honestly don't even think that there's any versions of this floating around. Maybe you'll find it on eBay every now and then, but the version I have originally supported 4 processors, but I've seen it run up to 8, because the platform support driver from Warp 4.5 is basically uncapped. But with that being said, I'm actually going to go ahead and wrap this up, because this video has been dragging on for almost an hour, and this is basically like a OS2 networking bonzana, but I think that's going to be it. So let me know if you have any questions, if you want to see the other topics covered in the future, if you want to see me cover Windows machines talking to OS2, just let me know, I'll be glad to cover it. But with that, I'll go ahead and say goodbye everyone, and y'all have a good one, and don't blow up your OS2 servers.